How's it going, everybody? This is your host, Coughlin, and welcome to the Sox on 35th podcast. We are back with another exciting episode covering your Chicago White Sox. As always, I'm joined by Jordan Lazowski and Nik Gaur. Boys, how was the 4th of July weekend and how did it treat you?
I think because I was up in Wisconsin, all the way up in Green Lake, I think it treated me better than it treated a lot of the folks who might have stayed in Chicago, at least from what I heard. I'll take it. I got to golf. Um, I got to be stressed out by this stupid team for a couple of days out in Cleveland. But overall, I thought it was a very successful holiday. How was it for both of you?
Yeah, same for me. I was out in Colorado, kind of like in the middle of nowhere for a few
Ooh,
days. So I'm just like you, though, Jordan. I was still stressing out about the Sox games. I was able to watch, but thankfully, them getting those last two games made my weekend a lot better because they got swept. I might have just been staring out of the mountains in a state of depression. So yeah, can't complain too much.
Staring out at the mountains in a state of depression. I mean, we didn't lose the series, boys. Like
No,
let's
we
tone
almost
her in
did.
a little bit. I
that's
hope.
what prevented it. I get what Nick's saying. That's what prevented it.
All right, fair enough, fair enough. It was good. Honestly, kind of stuck close to home. I was mostly a dad. I mean, I was just kind of a dad bod for the most part. Hung out with the little guy, hung out with the wife, took him to the pool. We tried going to this festival up here in Madison, and it was just like it wasn't big enough for the how big the space was, so there was just so much freaking walking in between, I guess. So I got a lot of steps in. It was just ungodly hot, but I mean that's nothing we're not used to at this point of the year in this area of the world. So can't complain.
It was fun though. It's always good to escape, do something fun with family. So I have few complaints. The complaints I have we'll obviously talk through in a little bit, but other than that, can't complain.
Yeah, I
And
mean
Duke, I'm wearing a different hat today. I hope you noticed that.
that's very timely as well. So I like that because we'll get into that in a little bit.
See,
Um,
now you're getting it. Now you're getting it.
all right. Again, listen, Nick's on a time crunch. He's got to go fly a plane after this, and we're not going to interrupt that. So let's just keep her moving and stop giving me reasons that I could potentially insult you because timeliness is not something that you have yet mastered, my friend.
That is true. That is true.
um, but anyway, it's great to hear, boys. Nick, very jealous you were out in Colorado. That had to have been a really cool experience. Or it's just another day in the life of Nik Gaur. Being we're just not used to being out in Colorado all the time. So, regardless, we have quite a bit to cover in this episode. We've actually had quite a bit happen here especially over the weekend. I almost got into a Reddit war, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Also, be sure to check out the website, soxon35th.com, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at soxon35th. So, getting right into it, kind of set off the top, it's the number one bit of Sox news at this point. We split in Cleveland. It was a incredibly frustrating series, as Laz has alluded to already. And it's incredibly frustrating, I'm sure, for our own Sodfather, our own White Sox groundskeeper, watching the action over the weekend on the 4th of July. Probably had just no time to enjoy his own lawn, which is just absolutely dreadful. So, 7 games through, guys. 4-3, winning the season series so far. Did this series change your opinion on anything as far as the White Sox being able to win this division? Obviously comes with a little bit of an asterisk considering, the grounds crew, having the vacation off as well in Cleveland. So, I guess, Nick, we haven't heard from you in a while, buddy. Tell us how you feel about where the White Sox are in the AL Central.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the fact that you can't hide your disdain for that ground screw. Although I don't blame you. I mean, watching, I felt
It's
bad for
only going to get
Antonacci
better.
on some of those plays in left field.
Here's what I'll say about that too. Like, here's my hot take, and I didn't do enough research on this before. Like, if it's sunny and 75, whatever it was in Cleveland, and you can't field a playable field in a reasonable amount of time. Luckily, they could. You should have to
Almost 2
forfeit
hours
that game.
away.
That is my meatball hot take. Like, again, they fielded it in a reasonable amount of time. It didn't matter. But people were talking like, oh, they can come back in September. It's like, no, if you can't field, if it's not raining currently and the rest of your field is fine and you can't have fully playable conditions, that's your problem. That's a meatball hot take, and we don't need to get into it. But it blew my mind. Long story short.
Yeah, I mean, it's also awfully convenient that you as a White Sox fan are saying that because we know that Bossert's got us covered there. So
Right.
I don't fully disagree. It's just we would benefit from that rule. Um, anyway, yeah, the play on the field. I mean, it was sloppy. I'm not going to lie. Even though games that we won shouldn't have been as close as they were. The defense was not great. The base running was not great. Just a lot of weird mental errors and the bullpen too. I mean, everyone's complaining about the bullpen right now, and I have no issues with what Will Venable did this weekend. I actually thought he managed pretty well. It is so strange because there was like a 5 day stretch, a little bit of Baltimore, but really just in Cleveland, where Taylor, Newcomb, Hudson, and I guess if you want to throw Dominguez in there, you can. All of them were bad. And it's like at a certain point, what do you do? What can you do as a manager when all of your good relievers are struggling at the same exact time? And Chris Murphy is your best pitcher. Like that, I mean, maybe Sunday wasn't the best, but overall, he's been really good lately. So it was just a really weird series, and so many little things were going against us too. Like the home plate umpires. I usually don't complain about balls and strikes, but they were so bad the full week, even in Baltimore. And then there was so many like Kyle Seal, 108, 105 mile an hour line drives right to the center fielder. Just one of those weeks. So the fact that we came out of it 2-2, yet based on everything I just said, you would think we got swept. Like that is a huge accomplishment because the White Sox, in my opinion, are the more talented team and really have been all season than Cleveland. But execution just isn't always there. So being able to split that series is extremely important, like you said, Duke, because we have the season series over them as of right now. And also, Murakami coming back in the next week or two is going to be huge for this team going forward. So overall, it didn't really do much to change my opinion on the White Sox. I've kind of thought they're going to win this division for a few weeks now, as I've said on this show before. But it definitely made me have more confidence in them in the way they bounce back from tough losses. The fact that they don't dwell on it, that they can just put it behind them and win the next day. That's really impressive to me.
I guess I will answer similarly, but it's kind of a bad answer for me. Because Nick, you come from the standpoint of, well, I thought they were going to win the division regardless. I came away from it like, I think they're the better team, but they do so much stupid shit that I'm like, it's going to matter against Cleveland. Like, this is a team where you run into outs on the bases, you give teams extra outs in the field. This team will kill you. There are teams that it won't kill you, but Cleveland is not one of those teams. So I genuinely believe after watching the series, the White Sox, top to bottom, are the better team. Offensively, even with Ramirez in the lineup, like the Sox get Murakami back. So in my mind, it kind of balances out in that sense. But Cleveland just doesn't do as many dumb things. I know their left fielder, who Engel or whatever, is learning left field, so he's done some dumb things. But Cleveland on a whole doesn't do a lot of dumb things. So it's frustrating to watch that series, and I'm not sitting here like, oh, Venable should have done this or Venable should have done that. Even like the openers, people are complaining about. It's like, well, I kind of get it though. For some of them, the openers have to produce, but the opener's in there in the first place because you don't trust the starter to produce in that spot, so you might as well try it, right? So I didn't walk away from that series frustrated with anything Venable did. I walk away from it. Number one, every game is going to be close, but you got to find ways to add on as an offense. But number two, the relievers weren't terrible. It's just there was such a slim margin for error. Sometimes they're going to mess up, and you can't expect to have slim margin of error and also make mistakes on top of it like the White Sox did. So it really didn't change my opinion. I have thought they're the better team, but you can't play Cleveland the way that you did and maybe in September not expect that to matter. Like you're going to have to hope Cleveland's a little bit further out of it because I don't know. It just maybe moved the needle a little bit for me towards winning the division, but there are still a lot of things that Nick, you alluded to. It just wasn't crisp. And it almost like they were putting too much pressure on themselves for a July 4th weekend when you got 80 something games still left to go in the season.
Yeah, I mean, the only big gripe I had with Venable over the course of the weekend was something I've talked about good chunk of the season now, and that's just the idea of pitching Sir Anthony Dominguez in the 8th and giving Grant Taylor the 9th, but that's a discussion that we've had a million times already. I don't want to like reinvent the wheel on that. Overall, Cleveland's a very opportunistic team, and giving them opportunities when they're really not a great hitting team and kind of, giving them the mulligans and giving them the errors. There's a lot of that just simply can't happen as the season goes on. I'm not going to sit here and take fault as far as errors go in the outfield on Sunday when it's like, running in absolute swamp of Louisiana out there in left field, especially, because people apparently do not know how to drain tarps correctly. But the big key thing that really bugs me about this series is we allowed 18 walks over the course of these 4 games. And when you're facing a team that is not hitting particularly well, Stephen Kwan is somewhat getting his groove back, but he is having such a bad season when you look at like what his career norms are. And he's a scary bat in the lineup for me. I mean, Manzardo's got some power, but he strikes out. Like there was a lot of opportunities, and I don't want to just dog the bullpen completely because it's not their fault. Davis Martin had just an absolute stinker that we are just not used to him having. We can't be walking teams like this. When there is just not that much pop in the lineup, you have to go at these hitters. And, it's not necessarily like you just live with it and give up runs per se, but you have to challenge it. Like you have to treat it like a power pitcher would treat the 8th and 9th hitter in a lineup, Do not throw this guy balls. Do not try to make him chase. You go right at him every single time. And if you don't, there's a quick hook. So
that
I mean,
was the issue to me, was the amount of walks that came 7th, 8th, and 9th hitters in the lineup. That was brutal because now you're turning it back over to the top of the lineup with guys on back. That just can't happen. I forgot to mention, thank you for calling that out, dude. That was,
you have to make those guys kill you.
Yeah. And like you basically got Stephen Kwan right for this too. Like, I kept looking at his average, all of it, the OPS, everything. I'm like, oh, cool, free out of the bottom of the lineup. Let's just put him on base instead. Like, oh my god, like it was.
Patrick Bailey and Austin Hedges are like Barry Bonds apparently.
Yeah, and I said that too. It was the series they played here. I'm like, Patrick Bailey. It was the game the Sox blew the lead and then won. I forget who was pitching. Maybe I don't think it was Taylor. Whoever it was, it's like Patrick Bailey drove in the go-ahead run. Like, this dude's hitting a $150. Like, and then he does it again this weekend, and you walk him. And then Quan had a great weekend. I'm like, oh my god, you can't. To your point, dude, that bottom of the order, and that's where you're like, all right, you have to be able to get through guys without making mistakes. And 2, what we would said, a very opportunistic team.
Yeah, and that's honestly, like, that mentality is something I would have like seen throughout probably like half of the lineup. Honestly, like obviously you don't want to throw Manzardo a cookie or apparently Austin Hedges, but like you have to attack these guys. Like if you can make the discussion as a fan, and I know it's what a lot of people are probably thinking right now. Well, we don't necessarily have the pitching to be able to do that. You can't operate under that assumption. You have to operate under the assumption that you have guys out there that can win you baseball games. And a winning pitcher is a guy who attacks bad hitters. And most of this team is bad hitters. They're disciplined enough that they can take walks. And that's obviously what we saw over the course of the weekend. But that can't be something where that bites us down the line. And, that kind of brings me into my next point. There's been some discussion about Shane Smith, which, like, holy crap, it's nice to see him rise from the grave and, hear about Shane Smith again. What he's done in Charlotte's a different, completely different conversation, but, it's really fun to pitch in Charlotte. And then Tanner McDougal, healthy, productive, getting some work in. With where we are with our pitching staff, and it's similar discussion we have every week, which it kind of makes you wonder when we're actually going to make a significant move here. How quickly are you prepared to bring them into the big leagues to kind of try to get into the mix of what we're doing right now?
It just depends on how they want to use them, right? I think that's my biggest question is if you're fine with maybe they're both openers 2-3 innings or something like that, and you continue that strategy a little bit. Like yesterday, then is kind of my answer. Fetty being maybe he plays up in a relief role, or maybe you just call it a day and move on from him. I don't know. The crazy thing is, it's like what crazy being frustrating is like Brandon Isert and Trevor Richards, two of the names where those would be some of the first ones on the chopping block for me. But then all of a sudden they went and saved the bullpen the last 2 games. The White Sox won because Iser gives them 2 lockdown innings when nobody else could do it. And then Richards gave him an inning and a third, or an inning and 2/3, I believe, before turning it over to Newcomb. Like, both of them absolutely saved this team from getting swept at a certain point. So it is a hard conversation to have either way. I think I'd need to see more out of Shane Smith before doing anything. I think McDougal I might be a little bit faster with, just to try it, just because Smith was here and looked so bad. I guess see how things start to shape up, maybe what calls you start to get at the deadline. But I just don't view it as dire as, oh my God, we need 2 starting pitchers as a team. I'm like, hey, you can get away with 1 and really hammer home the bullpen and kind of call it a trade deadline. So I don't know. I go back and forth on it.
Yeah, I largely agree with that. One of the weird things about this bullpen, I kind of talked about it earlier when I said like the good relievers were all bad the same few days. They're kind of similar. The quote unquote bad relievers like Richards and Jordan Hicks, all those guys, they've actually been kind of solid lately. So there's not an obvious person to me where it's like you need to get rid of that person and bring up McDougal or Smith now. That's just not my point of view. And the other thing with McDougal, I know that he's working as a reliever in his rehab stints, and it's kind of been hinted that he might come up as a reliever soon. But McDougal threw 113 innings last year, and so far this year only has 26. So the injury, I know he's probably not be able to build off that anymore, but he's a guy that I want getting more innings. Like I've thought going into this season even that McDougal is probably a better prospect than even Hagen Smith. So I would like to see him. I don't know if starting in the big leagues makes sense given the way the roster is constructed right now, but it would be cool if he became like a bulk, like 3 inning guy, like kind of like what we thought Grant Taylor might be this year. Like not necessarily low leverage, could be like a 4-2 game in the 7th, bring in McDougal, see how long he can take you, that kind of thing. So that's kind of my hope for him. And then Shane Smith, his issue this year to me has just been that he doesn't throw strikes. So I don't know how much more effective he's going to be as a reliever, even if his stuff plays up a little bit. And who knows, maybe the not throwing strikes was because he was injured the whole time. Obviously, I don't really know that, but I'd be more fascinated by Smith working his way back as a starter, seeing how he does once he gets back up to AAA, and then maybe having him just reclaim his spot from, whether it's Fetty or if an injury comes up or Schultz, whoever it ends up being, just because he's kind of the wild card. Like there is a world where Shane Smith comes back in, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks or something, and is basically his last year self. And that changes everything, especially with Sean Burke being like a true ace over the last month or so. So I'm just kind of in wait and see mode, I guess, kind of similar to Jordan.
The McDougal thing would be interesting because it would force the White Sox to what it feels like be able to do what they clearly want to do, which is, I'm going to continue to hate it, but force Grant Taylor into just being the 1 inning closer. And I mean, that's going to tell you what they think about him long term. It's not so much like it's not so much that it's not the right move for this team. It's more so like we're talking 2027, 28, and 29 White Sox, right? Like if you're like on this team, yes, it makes sense to need someone in that 9th inning. So it is what it is, right? But I could see it being interesting to where you get those innings back up for McDougal the same way you were trying to get them for Taylor, but it doesn't seem like they're gonna get Taylor there, to be honest with you. So might as well try something different.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like where I'm at. Like I want us to try something different. Regardless of if we bring guys up, down, however we're gonna do this, I kind of want to like have these guys in a tier where I can expect like where we should expect to put these guys in like game situations, because like the biggest complaint I've had about Will Venable as far as bullpen construction goes is that there like really isn't any bullpen construction. We're just kind of throwing guys kind of a little bit on the feel side of things, which there's always a little bit of that I'm totally fine with in coaching. But I just at this point, Sir Anthony Dominguez has not worked out as your closer. Sir Anthony Dominguez historically works out really well in the 8th inning. why not try to start giving that a shot? And Grant Taylor, it's great to have him at any point in the game when you feel it's really tight and you feel like you have the top of the order coming up next half inning. So you just want to get through this so we can get more runs on the board. And then you feel like you're in a more comfortable spot because that's obviously what Will Venable's trying to do with Grant Taylor. I, I don't have an official statistic in front of me, but I feel like you could look at any point where he's being put in the 6th, 7th inning in a tight game. There's some strong bats coming up in the next half inning, and that's kind of the leverage of it. But I think we need to hit a situation where we have a little bit more consistency on the back end of the bullpen, and then we can test things out with really everybody else. And reward good performances, as much as I've dogged a guy like, say, Jordan Hicks, since he's been back here, I have a line here. Since he's been back, 5 games, 4.1 innings, 8 strikeouts, 1 walk, which is crazy when you watch him the first part of this season. I'm not saying you have to, that doesn't mean we pitch him every single time we're in a situation we don't want to use the back end of the bullpen because, that's like the whole overuse freaking mess that we get into that just ends up spiraling into nothing. Why not use him just a little bit more in situations where you need a fireballer and you don't want to use a Grant Taylor or Sir Anthony Dominguez for whatever reason earlier in a game? Just better utilization of the tools that we currently have, and totally open to the idea of a guy like Shane Smith who really got he started the season terrible. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, and hasn't gotten a whole lot better since in the minors. But this team started out really bad, and he was the one who had the highest expectations, I think, out of that entire starting rotation. And him pitching as bad as he did, he got a little scapegoated there. So I don't hate the idea of seeing him on the major league roster to at least see that there's something there, because he had shown last year that there is something there worth digging into with him. Maybe some struggles are here along the way because he has more of a scouting report, but he can be a really good pitcher because he's proven it. So, I mean, a situation, if we're going to keep messing around with guys who are in the organization, I really wouldn't mind seeing him up sooner rather than later. And I think McDougal would make a really good opener, kind of similar in the sense where if he's just rolling in the first inning, you can bring him out for the second.
Yeah, you can do it to like a true opener of like less of a true opener. I mean, where it's like, hey, 3 innings, and that kind of helps a little bit on the back end too. I'm cool with that. Absolutely. And that kind of solves a bunch of things. I think they need to do 2 things. Number one, they got to figure out what they're going to do with a guy like that. Like, if you really want to put Grant Taylor at the back end, fine. Then you need someone to play the Grant Taylor role, right? I think McDougal probably makes the most sense. But also, number 2, you kind of got to figure out what Dominguez's role is, because he wasn't in very often this week. They've kind of just stopped using him, and I get why, don't get me wrong, but you just got an empty spot essentially in the bullpen by essentially being like, we're not going to use them unless the situation is perfect. Those situations aren't going to come up, so you got to figure out what you're doing here. Those are the 2 big things for me in terms of how we answer this question. What do they do with Dominguez and McDougal? Shane Smith would be nice, but you got to figure it out as a starter, I think. I think that's still probably the path for him.
So the craziest thing about thinking about the perfect situation for Sir Anthony Dominguez, I can assure you it is not following Grant Taylor as he's about to freaking pitch a walk-off.
Right. Yeah, I just... That was another situation. It was so odd how they handled that game, where it's like you tried to sneak in Taylor for 2, and I'm like, maybe we'll see. And again, I'm all for it. It just felt like you didn't need to do that in that situation, because I don't believe when Taylor came in the 8th, I don't believe it was the top of the order. I believe it was the bottom part of the order, if I remember correctly. So it felt like they didn't need to do it the way they did it. And again, I sit here as the proponent of the multi-inning Taylor outing. So it's like, I wasn't mad at it, but I'm like, if you're still trying to figure things out a little bit, that would have been a good 8th, 9th situation for those 2 guys. So it's, again, but the question, it still comes back to the question of what are you doing with Dominguez at this point. Like, you can't just not pitch him. So you got to figure out what's good. You had situations throughout the weekend that no matter where you felt like you wanted to put him, you could have put him in low leverage, high leverage, medium leverage. We're all there. And I'm like, I haven't seen him. I haven't even seen him warm up. So I don't know. It is a looming larger question for them, honestly.
Yeah, it just boggles the mind because, how are you going to have enough trust in him to be able to hopefully get you to extra innings at that point, but you didn't have enough trust in him to just toss him out there in the eighth, I don't it's something we've talked about all year, and I feel like we're just going to keep on talking about it until anything like is set in stone with what his role is going to be moving forward. But what is set in stone is Miguel Vargas is an all-star. Golf clap. Golf clap for Miguel Vargas. Because for the record, I absolutely dogged this guy last year. And
I have so many tweets to delete.
Right.
You know what, though? Like, who doesn't love seeing this? Who doesn't love seeing somebody that, like, you personally dogged, like, just make you eat it? Like, that's the best thing as a fan. There are so many people that would, like, take the ego of that, and they would not, they'd be embarrassed. They'd be like you, Laz. They'd try to rush to delete tweets and pretend they never said it type deal. But, like, dude, I want people to bring that up and show that I was wrong, because it's like, dude, that just shows how far he's come. And that's been the story for him this entire way, man. Absolutely awesome. Very deserving. Probably the most deserving on the club, had, with Munetaka Murakami obviously getting injured. That was very much moving in the direction that that's what he was going to be, because holy smokes, I would almost still just send him to the All-Star game with Vargas just to take it all in, because he'll probably be back. But who else do you think is most deserving? My son's having a fit behind me. I apologize. The only name I'll toss out here for you guys to chew on, and it's because I actually heard the Cleveland play-by-play bring it up during the most loved Peacock broadcast that everybody just absolutely loved. All MLB fans just love having Peacocks on Sundays. He was really hyping up Colson Montgomery, and this is before Colson had even hit his first home run, and talking about there should have been a lot more hype and a lot more of a discussion about the idea that Colson Montgomery should have been an all-star. But Nick, kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, just to start, I want to plead with Nike or MLB or somebody. Miguel Vargas being an all-star is great. He fully deserves it. Every at-bat of his is just must-watch TV right now. But where are the Miguel Vargas shirtsies? Like, there are jerseys, but the shirts are nowhere to be found. My wife doesn't really, she doesn't buy a lot of new White Sox stuff, but every time we go to a game together, he gets a home run, to the point where she says to me, I want to buy a Miguel Vargas shirt. So we go to the Sox store after the game, and they just don't make them. They're not online. They're nowhere. He's an all-star. Like, we need these.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, that wasn't the question. The question about who's getting snubbed. I mean, yeah, the problem with Colson is obviously his last couple weeks of June were pretty bad. I mean, I know that's not why, that the voting for the players might happen before that, but on just the numbers alone, I can see why some infielders might make it over him. The thing that bothers me though, is that the White Sox are in first place, and they're the only team in the AL Central with only one All-Star. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense on the surface. And to me, the biggest snub is actually Davis Martin, because even though he kind of had a little bit of a rougher stint there in June, his overall body of work is still quite strong, and his numbers pretty much across the board are better than Michael Wacha's, and Wacha made the team, even though Bobby Witt Jr. is also an all-star. So the Royals didn't need Wacha to make it. He just got voted in by the players. So to me, it's Davis Martin, although you can make a good case for Colson, or even with the injury, Murakami, and then, Sean Burke, maybe, if he'd started this a few starts earlier. So yeah, I don't know. Jordan, what about you?
I could have gone with, I could see Taylor having a case. I could see Newcomb having a case. I'm going to be honest. I understand why it wasn't Montgomery. If you look at the infielders, they picked 2 first basemen. McGonigal was the other, and Bazana was the other middle infielder. I think Bazana made sense, and I think McGonigal made more sense than Montgomery, if I'm being completely honest. I know that's not going to win me a lot of fan support by saying that, but I think they got it right, to be honest with you. He's a very valuable player, but not in the way that is going to get the same sort of recognition, if that makes sense. It's not that he's not valuable. It's not that he's not the top one of the top shortstops in baseball. Just more so when you've only got 5 guys as reserves. Yes, Bobby Witt was absolutely correct. And then Bazana, probably correct. McGonigal, I think, was absolutely correct. So that was hard. Davis Martin, I agree, would be the most obvious snub. With both Newcomb and Taylor, I think, having the strongest cases that didn't. But yeah, unfortunately, it feels like they got it right. The frustrating thing is, Nick, to your point, how do they only get one All-Star and they're the team in first place? That was a struggle for me as well, actually.
And is pitcher selection for the All-Star game like not the most frustrating thing in the world?
And it's a thing too. It's like, I bet Martin probably gets named when one of those guys pull out. I'm sure Martin's probably on the short list to get invited. So it really doesn't bother me as much because I know there's so much rotation with that. But he definitely had the strongest case of the guys who didn't get it.
Yeah, it's just more annoying like how that selection process goes because it's essentially the manager selecting his pitching staff, and there's just
still
been
probably better than fan voting this year, though.
For
fair.
sure.
Very fair.
Shout out to the Blue Jays.
Yeah. Oh God.
I guess I just want to give Colson Montgomery his flowers a little bit right here. I think the biggest thing that worked against him was he has had such a good like start to his MLB career, but it's split between 2 seasons, so it doesn't get the full oomph of it. It's almost like with what he's done in this first half of the season, it's people are kind of used to how it is. The traditionalist numbers aren't going to look great. The batting average doesn't look great. On-base percentage doesn't look wonderful. Slugging looks nice, but the slugging is basically carrying the entire OPS. But through 156 games, I did this just looking this up earlier. 5.5 WAR, 44 home runs, 108 RBIs, 25 doubles, 125 OPS plus. Comparing this to say either a guy's first season or a guy's first like 150, 160 games, 3 names are insanely comparable. Obviously he's not a speedster for as far as one of these guys goes, so obviously one of them is going to sound a little off, but Gunnar Henderson, Bobby Witt Jr., which obviously Colson's not a speedster, but very, very close as far as what they do in the batting square, and Corey Seager. Although Corey has historically held a higher batting average, although he did have a really hard time early in his career as far as drawing walks.
Which is funny because that was the comp that a lot of people had for Montgomery. So that is actually pretty funny to see.
Yeah, which I think, sure, Colson, it sucks he didn't get into the All-Star game. You're going to get in All-Star games, buddy. I don't think you have a whole lot to worry about. But moving on here forward, well, I guess before we get to the kind of the final part that we're going to be talking about here, White Sox ball girl, Kayla Corbett, there is a vote currently going out for right now. MLB is handling it kind of similar to like the last selection, kind of similar to what me and Laz were talking about as far as like, the last players and stuff like that. Very cool thing MLB is doing. Kayla Corbett, White Sox ball girl. Voting is happening until Tuesday on all MLB social platforms and MLB.com/ABC ballot. Like, let's vote one of our own. Like, that would just be us. That would make her freaking year. You know what I mean? That's just a cool thing to do.
Get a second All-Star that the team deserves.
What's that?
Get the second All-Star that this team deserves.
Absolutely. 100%. Which, by the way, she's doing very good in voting right now, but let's keep pumping those numbers up. She's I believe battling against somebody on the Mets. So unfortunately for whoever the ball girl for the Mets is, I don't think Mets fans are going to get hyped up for anything at this point. So it's about a 2-dog race right now. So as I said a little bit earlier, Laz, wearing the Charlotte Knights hat is a little relevant because Munetaka Murakami is starting his rehab assignment on Tuesday. Maybe, assuming
confirmed.
Yeah. Okay. Confirmed. Just want to make sure that was confirmed. Didn't want to just be speaking completely out of my ass. So this is where this discussion is going to start to happen. I don't think Munetaka Murakami is going to have much issues getting back up to speed and hitting in Charlotte of all places. Nick, kick us off with this. Does it make sense to bring him back before the All-Star break? Um, do you think you just kind of try to steamroll that process and get him back here, or do you wait maybe until I was kind of eyeing up Toronto? That would make a lot of sense for him to come back. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as he's healthy, you bring him back. So this is the longer end of the original recovery window. I think it'll be about 6 weeks if he were to come back this coming weekend. And they said 4 to 6 weeks. So I'm not convinced of, this idea that he's being rushed or anything like that. Like as long as he's checking the boxes and feels good at Charlotte, then I say just bring him back as soon as you can. I also feel like people might be downplaying a little bit the impact that he might have, which is not to say that Jacob Gonzalez has been bad or anything. In fact, I've actually been very impressed by him. But Murakami, we love Miguel Vargas here, but Murakami had like a 100-point advantage on OPS or something like that. Like he was like 940, I think. Having him back in the lineup, I think fundamentally changes a lot of those Cleveland games. He probably hits a couple home runs that series and makes those one-run, nail biters a little bit more comfortable. Maybe you don't have to use Taylor or Newcomb in some of those games. So I'm really excited to get him back. I think you bring him back as soon as you can. It sounds like they're kind of targeting before the break based on the comments that Venable made. So that's what I'm hoping for. Again, assuming good health, assuming no setbacks, anything like that, because he'll get the All-Star break after that. And ideally that will, give him some time to recuperate in case he is sore or, needs any rest or anything. You can also DH him for a bit too. I know Benintendi's actually been pretty good, but I'm sure he can deal with it for a couple of games. So that being said, I do have to drop here in a minute. So just before I go, I want to say, I know at the end you guys are going to do like a USA versus Belgium, my score prediction thing. So as somebody who correctly predicted the score of yesterday's Mexico game, even though I'm not a huge soccer fan, put me down as saying USA wins 2-1. Hopefully that happens. So I've got a dip, but go Sox and go USA. And I'm glad I could make this episode, at least for most of it.
Thanks,
We love
Nick.
to hear it. USA all the way, baby.
Yep. See you guys.
See you, Nick. Well, Duke, just me and you again. The people's favorite. Hardly, actually.
Feels like it's been a
Especially we're talking
long
about
time.
me. I do agree with what Nick had to say though about bringing him back. It gave me a little bit of pause. I'm like, just wait till the end of the All-Star break. Just don't try and rush anything. Move forward. Who's trying to jam this through essentially? But he brings up a good point, Nick did, about it's 3 games probably. He's not coming back this series. It's probably 3 games against the A's. You get one more home series. There's so much going on with the draft and so many people are going to be in the ballpark. There are a lot of good reasons to think about bringing him back for that game if he's healthy, right? And I think that's the assumption. I think where everyone gets a little bit of pause is, well, we've heard this thing about hamstrings before. Is he really ready? Yada, yada, all that stuff. And I get that. I think those are all very valid concerns, which is why I have that little bit of a pause about when makes sense. But you got to take the training wheels off at some point. These are big boys that are playing a game. So like they know how to take care of themselves. I think the larger question though is like, what do they do with this team? I have a semi-hot take about what they should do, but I don't think it's as easy as just option Jacob Gonzalez, or I don't think it should be, which is crazy to say.
I think that's the entire thing. And this is why I have a really hard time thinking they're going to rush him back here, unless things move along quick. I guess my entire mindset with how long they took to do this, I guess how long they kind of took to get him to like start running bases and get moving is they really wanted to get a good look at Jacob Gonzalez and they really wanted to get a good look at the roster. This is going to be a bit of a crunch with how we're going to do this if we don't kind of start heading towards the trade deadline and taking a look at what we can possibly get for some of these guys.
I didn't think about it that way. That's interesting.
Krishik is a guy that I kind of think of who could potentially in a weird non-selling move, but still like, understanding where he is on the roster per se, he could potentially get a pretty good return. But honestly, dude, this is probably something we should talk about maybe a little bit closer to Sunday, just based on I really don't know what the Sox are going to do. But I think for that reason, I think they're going to wait. and I really think they're going to push it
Yeah,
towards a little bit close to that Toronto series. Plus, logistically, why rush him up right before the All-Star break when we're about to have another break? Maybe just really let him get comfortable in Charlotte hitting again. I mean, dude, he's gonna absolutely mash down there. Let's let him like hit the freaking ground running if that's what we're gonna do. I could be totally wrong, but I think there's gonna be some moves here moving forward in the form of either trades. I don't see a necessity for DFA, and I think we're a little bit past the point of the idea that Andrew Benintendi is going to get DFA. So
I agree.
we're in a roster crunch. And oh, by the way, Luis Angel Acuna is all of a sudden shown you can't just let him walk either. So
And he's one of
decisions are going to have to be made.
he's one of few right-handed guys in this lineup too. Like it's super lefty heavy still. I offered the potential hot take of put Gonzalez at second base when there's a righty on the mound, and Mydroth when there's a lefty. You've got a natural middle infielder trying to play first base right now and doing a decent job. Not great, but a decent job. Mydroth has not hit righties well this year. And one thing, too, about it that I didn't bring up when we were talking about the Cleveland series, this team's not been great with runners in scoring position. I do think they need to revamp the lineup a little bit, just in general. I think right now Montgomery has the most at-bats with runners in scoring position on this team and is one of the worst with runners in scoring position. I think you need to change that up a little bit. I know he was forced into a spot because Murakami was hurt, so I get it to a point, but I do think there need to be some changes to this lineup once he returns. And I think Gonzalez is a guy who has hit well with runners in scoring position, so I think that matters. And Mydroth is not one of those. So again, all of these things, guys have been forced into spots. I get that. But I offer that potential hot take of, play those two guys to their strengths. I don't really love long-term two guys, Antonacci and Mydroth, who kind of do the same thing in the same lineup, who are more bat first versus power first, to almost an extreme. Now, Antonacci's shown a little bit more power, so the comparison isn't exactly perfect, but I don't know. That is my offer. It gets Junior Perez off the roster. So you force Acuna to probably play a little bit more outfield. You force probably Benintendi to play a little bit more outfield, which I don't know how they feel about that. I don't know. I think that is balancing the line best between winning and development and not trying to get too many guys to play out of position.
I guess the only real rebuff I would have for Gonzalez taking time away from Mydroth was, I mean, Sam Antonacci couldn't do that. We had to find another position for him to stay in, like being like even before it was obvious that Sam needed to be in the lineup every single day. Sam still didn't do that with Mydroth. You know what I mean? So it's a tough spot, and
But
it's
at
a
the
really
same
good.
time, they have started. You've seen Antonacci's played a little bit more second base. So I agree, but I think they're at least a little bit more open to this idea that, hey, maybe this isn't every day with Mydroth right now. But I do completely agree. Like, hey, they already moved a guy out of position for Mydroth. Why wouldn't they do it again? Essentially, I do get what you're saying there.
Yeah, it's an intriguing spot. It's a really good problem to have because it shows that there's enough viable options on the roster for most positions to the fact to where just imagine like a year or two ago, like thinking that like any position was this safe. Mydroth is obvious. Like if you're looking at a lineup, yes, Mydroth is the kind of the weak link that you would consider, especially when you consider right-handed pitching instead of compared to left-handed pitching, starting pitching that's in the league. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't have a great answer for this. I
I think
really
the
feel like,
easy one, though, is Gonzalez, but I don't think it's easy because he hasn't performed. It's easy because, well, he's been playing first base and our first baseman is back, so let's just take the path of least resistance.
well, man, and if you're Jacob Gonzalez, like you get optioned after what you've done this season, like
Right.
what more can you possibly do if you're Jacob Gonzalez? And that gets frustrating. And then to the flip side of it, and I don't want to just insinuate that, clubhouse guys would get annoyed about a rookie taking a spot of a guy that's been, kind of around here. do people get annoyed in the clubhouse if Mydroth isn't getting as many at bats? There's so many things you have to kind of really be careful with when you're tinkering with this. It's a lot easier on paper, and in this situation where it's really not. But it gets even harder when you consider the personalities and veterans in the clubhouse who, like this guy, I wrote it out with this guy, he's earned it. Or, somebody being like, dude, Jacob has every bit of earned how to be or earned the right to be on this team. How in the world can we send him down? So I feel like there has to be I feel like there almost has to be a move as far as a trade, some sort of movement that's going to be between two organizations compared to us just doing it in-house. Otherwise, we're going to be fucking stacked in Charlotte. Holy smokes.
I do think that the most consistent thing for Venable to do would be cut into Mydroth's playing time. I think that is consistent with he's done it with Benintendi. He's done it. They just sent Shane Smith down. They're like, we're not dealing with this. You perform or
we're not
gone.
Dealing with it.
Right. We're not doing this whole, it's another rebuild thing. Like, you either perform or you're gone. I think the most consistent thing for him to do would be, again, it's not his decision at the end of the day. I'm sure the front office has a lot to say. I think the most consistent thing would be to leave Gonzalez to reward those who have performed. Though it's not the easiest thing to do, though, because of the clubhouse considerations. So, but we've all credited Venable for doing good things with the clubhouse. So at a certain point, continue to test them and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, and I thought Brett made a good point. It would be interesting with how many lefties we would have in the lineup in a scenario like that. It would be really nice to have two ready bats off the bench ready to go. And Chase is a guy that you wouldn't consider a bench guy. He would still definitely be considered a starter and would probably still get the lean as far as between him and Gonzalez. But I don't know. Maybe we get really freaking froggy and all of a sudden we trade a guy like Jacob Gonzalez for a certified bullpen arm or certified starter like, say, Sonny Gray.
That's where I could see them doing that, is if Mune is like doing well in Charlotte and they're like, we're just going to wait. That's where your theory gets interesting. Give Gonzalez a little bit more run. See if you can start to get people perked up to the idea that, hey, he's a legit piece. Let's trade for him. A lot of moving parts with this, although there are a lot of different ways they could go with this. And I'm very curious to see what they say. I don't think there's an easy, I think that the path of least resistance is send Gonzalez down and move forward as normal. But I don't think that's what they're going to. I'd be shocked, honestly, if that's what they decided to do.
Yeah, I mean, I can go back and forth on this all day because there is a legitimate argument you can make about Gonzalez being that a really good guy in the minors that is ready to pop up at the site of any injury or anything like that, or if a guy just happens to fall off a cliff. But there's a lot of meat on the bone, but we've got baseball to play this week yet. White Sox are going to be playing Boston, and then we have the A's this weekend. So let's save her till next weekend, buddy.
Do what the Sox are doing. Just push it down the line until you absolutely have to address it.
Yeah, this is the Will Venable podcast. But on that note, by the way, I don't watch soccer, but USA all the way. I don't know if you have a score prediction really quick.
I asked ChatGPT and Google Gemini. Both told me the USA should win. I'll be different than Nick and go 2-0 or 1-0, something like that. I don't know soccer. Like my brain capacity really only gives me like 1.5 sports. Like the way I like hyper focus on things, there's not enough room in my brain. So it's baseball, unfortunately. But it's a fun story. The betting lines seem to agree, and so does AI. So AI is never wrong, right?
It is a fun story depending on who you ask. But on that note, I think we should get out of here. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have this week for the Sox On 35th podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Also, be sure to check out the website, soxon35th.com, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at SoxOn35th to stay updated with Chicago White Sox. This has been Duke Coughlin, joined by Jordan Lazowski, and most of the show by Nik Gaur. We'll be back as we cover another week of White Sox baseball. Thank you, and go Sox.
Quick shout out before we go to my uncle, who is a avid listener, who, while I was with him all weekend, I said I would shout him out on the podcast. So, Uncle John, shout out to you, and go White Sox.
Golf claps.